Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
What exactly are we supposed to make of the San Francisco 49ers this season? Also, which fantasy receivers should you be avoiding? And Farmageddon is going to be a shootout.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The San Francisco 49ers are a trendy bounce-back pick this year. It's supposed to be an easy schedule. It's still Kyle Shanahan. We expect this offense to be great. Brian Peacock from Locked On 49ers joins me now. And Brian, this is also a team that is going to be hoping to gain some defensive improvements from a group of rookies, from bringing Robert Saleh back into the fold. How good can this team actually be, though? Not just like, oh, they can win some games because the schedule's easy.
I have no idea what to think of this football team. It's one of the strangest groups that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have put together. And even
I'm not sure the 49ers know what to make of it either, to be honest.
That's exactly it. Listening to Kyle Shanahan talk about his own team, he's compared it to 2017, which 2017 was a garbage roster that the 49ers had. It was a holdover roster. Everyone was gone. They started from scratch. They did have a couple of good holdover players that ended up being a big part of their teams, but there's injuries already, a lot of soft tissue, some ankles, nothing catastrophic aside from Brandon Ayuk's injury last year. He's going to miss 6 weeks. You have on the offensive side of the ball, DeMarcus Robinson's, suspended for the first 3 games. So, Ricky Pearsall, and he looks like he's ready to go, but Ricky Pearsall might be the number 1 wide receiver, but as we know, he's not going to be the number 1 option in the offense because it's going to be Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be George Kittle. And Kyle Shanahan has always been able to run the football, so I'm not worried about that. As long as Kittle and Christian McCaffrey are healthy, they're going to get through it at wide receiver. They're going to be okay. You might see some Sky Moore in there who they just traded for and returning some kicks. And you might see some young players filtering in and out. You might see some Russell Gage in there. Hopefully Juwan Jennings is back and ready to be the number 2 or 1A with 1A, 1B with Ricky Pearsall there to start the year before Brandon Ayuk comes back. You might see some Robbie Chosen out there, right? But they'll figure it out. And Kyle Shanahan will be okay on the offensive side of the ball. But the question is, can they figure that out and also carry a defense while there are some stars on the defensive side of the ball in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner? They might start upwards of 5 rookies on the defense. And I don't know how many times you've seen Super Bowl teams running 5 rookies out there on the football field, right? And so there's going to be growing pains. And you could really paint the picture that, 1 or 2 of these, and they drafted 5 defensive players in a row on the defensive side of the ball. They had a couple extra picks in there as well. So they've got some talented players. And you bring Robert Saleh back to coach those guys up on the defensive side of the ball, which should be a huge upgrade at the coordinator spot. So you could paint the picture that a couple of those guys develops, much like the Rams did last year, who looked like they were about to have a fire sale after 5 weeks of the season and then win the division, right? So can a couple of those guys develop? You get Brandon Ayuk back, you get Juwan Jennings at full strength with Purdy, with Kittle and McCaffrey, and you can really paint the picture in the second half of the year with an easy schedule. This would be a really good football team. What does it look like early, and how do all the things come together, and how all of those things develop is a really big question right now. And I think Kyle Shanahan himself doesn't even quite know.
There's a lot of shrouded in mystery things about this 49ers team right now. And one of the big ones you mentioned, Brandon Ayuk, and we still don't really have a firm understanding of when he's going to be able to come back here. Kyle Shanahan has been loath to offer much of anything by way of timelines here. What is the odds on timeline here? What makes the most sense to you?
I have placed it at Halloween. I think he'll be back in November. Will he be back at the 6-week mark? Will it be the 8-week mark? That's the big question for me. And what exactly will he look like? Because
what does he look like?
It was a nasty injury because it wasn't just an ACL. There was other things involved. And so that's the question, is what will he look like? He's moving around great. Everything seems to be going at or ahead of schedule. John Lynch, the GM, he's kind of an optimist anyway, but he talks about how special players and special talents, their bodies are different and they kind of just recover different. And he's running. He was out there in the last season game, and actually one of the beat writers thought the Niners might get fined because he was kind of doing too much catching passes, running around while he's on the PUP list pre-game. So like, from that standpoint, it looks like his recovery is going really well. So he'll be out for probably 6 weeks at least is my guess. And then we could probably start talking about him coming back. If he's back in October, it's a huge boon for the 49ers offense. Maybe more like, early November is kind of where I'm putting it.
Try and place them in the NFC hierarchy for me quickly here.
That's tough. We actually just recorded the NFC West preview with the other hosts from the NFC West here on the Locked On Network. And we are all so split on the division. We're talking about what the tiebreakers might be in week 18 with this division, right? It could go in any order, really. And is Matthew Stafford healthy? So the NFC is not the AFC either, with powerhouses at the top. There's a lot of good teams. There's a lot of teams that could become great, but they're not great yet. The Detroit Lions were one of the better teams. They could take a big step back, right? There's some questions about what that might look like. The Philadelphia Eagles is the team everybody's chasing right now. And when you start looking at the teams that are the next group of teams after, the Philadelphia Eagles, I think the Packers are going to be in there. I think almost any team you could argue in the North could be there. Yeah. I think Washington, you could argue, could be there. Will you see a sophomore slump, though, for Jaden Daniels? Because that tends to happen, and their roster is not perfect, right? And the Niners could be in there. It could go right. The Niners could win 6 games again. So I have no idea. Well, one of my buddies said, man, the Niners look like they're going to be a 12-team team and a 12-win team, and at the same time, they look like they're going to be a 10-loss team. And I said, you know what? That is exactly right. The Niners are a 12-10 team.
You can stay up to date all year on the San Francisco 49ers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On 49ers on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Your Locked On Sports Today coming up. Should you be avoiding drafting Tyreek Hill for your fantasy team? Before we get to that, John Wall decided to hang it up. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Perhaps you believe the Green Bay Packers are going to win the Super Bowl, or maybe you have some division winner dark horses you'd like to parlay. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. The SEC is turning the page to a bigger schedule. Starting in 2026, the league will expand to a 9-game conference slate. The first time in history it's gone that deep. Each school will still keep 3 annual rivals while rotating through the rest of the league every 2 years, meaning fans will see every SEC matchup, both home and away, over a 4-year span. Commissioner Greg Sankey said the move ensures the league's strength of schedule will stand out under the new college football playoff system. For context, the SEC had been playing 8 conference games since 1992, with only the 2020 COVID season bumping it to 10. So after decades of debate, literally since Bill Clinton was in office, the wait is finally over. Over on the diamond, the Mets are starting to lose their grip on reality after losing a series to the Nationals.
The New York Mets dropped a series in the nation's capital, losing 2 in a row to the Washington Nationals, and it was an unacceptable effort. Losing a series to the worst team in the National League, one of the worst teams in baseball, would be unacceptable anywhere else on the calendar. It is even more unacceptable for it to happen in the month of August. Certainly unacceptable to happen with the Mets holding on to the slimmest of margins over the Cincinnati Reds for the final spot in the National League playoff race. And it's unacceptable for this Mets offense over 2 days to have just 2 hits against the worst bullpen in the sport. 30th in ERA, 30th in WHIP, bottom third in every other major category when you look at bullpens. But the Mets somehow unable to crack the code. Sean Manaea struggles on the mound. The Mets need more. They need more from Kodai Senga. They need more from Sean Manaea. Both of those guys got off to great starts, but couldn't finish the job. And if the Mets want to hold off the Reds, if the Mets want a shot at even playing in October, they need to be better, and they need to be better in a hurry.
And the Dodgers top the Rockies to avoid a series loss Yes, you heard me right.
Another stinker by the Dodgers against the worst team in baseball. Best case scenario now, they split the series against the Rockies if they win tomorrow. And honestly, that's a big if, considering the way that they've played on Monday and on Wednesday. To make matters worse, Shohei Ohtani didn't look sharp on the mound, and then he took a line drive off of his right leg. He finished the inning, even took an at-bat, but before he could get another chance at the plate, he was pulled from the game. Not great news for Dodgers fans. And while all of this is happening, the Padres have a comfortable lead over the Giants. So yeah, there's a real chance LA and San Diego enter this weekend series tied at the top of the division. Things can get really, really interesting.
Which fantasy receivers should you avoid in your fantasy draft? Locked On Fantasy Football host Michelle Majuk and Vinny Iyer explain why you should not be drafting Tyreek Hill or Drake London.
Obviously, if a certain player falls multiple rounds later than you thought, then maybe you'd consider them. But where they're sitting right now, we would never, ever draft them. And we're going to go through our two wide receivers that fit this category and a quarterback. And on tomorrow's show, we'll get to running backs and our tight ends. But Vinny, who's your top wide receiver that you will never draft this year near his current cost?
Yeah, it's a guy that has been a major fantasy producer on two teams, the Chiefs and the Dolphins, but he's getting a little older. There's some upside guys I'd rather have around there. He's wide receiver 14. Never will I draft Tyreek Hill this season. I'm not going to do it for any of my redraft leagues. He's just too old and he's too costly. Like, the regression is going to come more and more here. Now, I know he's played hurt a lot throughout his career and able to do that and produce. And just a couple years ago, he was a massive fantasy scorer. We're talking about him pushing for the first 2,000-yard receiving season in NFL history. Well, that didn't quite happen. And then the Dolphins kind of lost all their offensive mojo last year. And I think this might be as much to do with how I'm feeling about Mike McDaniel as a play caller right now than just Tyreek Hill turning 30 and slowing down a little bit. He's played a lot, and he's had a lot of injuries. If you look at it, like hamstring and things that have bothered him soft tissue-wise over the years. So they can add up a little bit, but he's played a lot since he got to Kansas City. He was returning, and then he was a full-time receiver, seeing a bunch of targets, and then he's been peppered with targets a lot in Miami playing off Jalen Waddle. But my concern is this offense. I think they're going to do a lot of what they did last year. They're going to compress this offense. The offensive line has some issues. Tua Tagovailoa, they're deathly afraid of getting him smacked around and taking too many hits. That's why it's such a high completion percentage, trying to get the ball out as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, Tyreek Hill can't get it done just by after the catch work anymore, right? He's quick. He's still got speed, better than a lot of people that are younger than him in this league. But are they going to put him in position to succeed? Are they going to stretch the field? It's really the concern over just the Dolphins offense in general. Now, Devin Achane was kind of the focal point, a little bit of the passing game when they were dumping off. Now he's hurt, but I think he'd come back. And look, I don't want to hear about this anymore, but Darren Waller seems like he might be at least a guy that's going to get some targets on this team, replacing Jonnu Smith. So I just don't want to go here. I think he's around too many people that I'd rather have with some upside. I mean, you look at Ladd McConkey, even with the Keenan Allen signing, I'm excited about him. A.J. Brown is somewhere going in this range. You have Mike Evans that still is going to get the job done. There are just some upside guys around the spot that I'd rather have this year than Tyreek Hill at this cost. Now, if Tyreek drops to the 20s somewhere and people are worried about the age, injury, attrition, all that stuff, then I might pull the trigger. But this high just outside the top 12 and the wide receiver one's not doing it.
Yeah, I can't get there with you with him. I do actually like Tyreek Hill's cost this year. Now, I wouldn't take him above cost, right? Like, I'm not reaching for him. I'm not dying to get him. But where he's going, I think it's super, super fair because there obviously are injuries that maybe the drop-off happened last year. But there's a lot of excuses for last year too, right? With the injuries and the Tua injury and then just the offense in general being terrible. They changed off OCs. But if Mike McDaniel wants to keep his job, he needs to fix this offense, right? And the first way you fix it is just targeting Tyreek Hill like crazy. And when Tyreek Hill got the targets from Tua last year, he was still a dominant 4. So I really like Tyreek Hill still, especially at his current cost, even if there's some risk involved. Now, I like him more than my guy, I'm about to say. And my current, this player is going a good chunk ahead of Tyreek Hill, and it's Drake London. Like, right off the bat, same price. I would rather have Tyreek Hill than Drake London. And Drake London's going a good 12 spots ahead of him in overall draft position. Drake London right now is a wide receiver 9. I don't really understand it. So he was a wide receiver 14 last year on average. I know he finished as the wide receiver 5 in total points, but because he played all 17 games, right? He had a big breakout game in that final game in week 18 that made his numbers go like crazy. But from weeks 1 through 17, the true fantasy season, he was averaging 12.2 points per game in half PPR. That puts him at 22nd among wide receivers in the fantasy season on average scoring. He has a brand new quarterback. Now, maybe Penix Jr. is better than Cousins. I mean, Drake London did just fine with Penix last year, but still, that's a worry. And he was a top 10. Again, he's going top 10 wide receivers, wide receiver 9. He was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver just 2 times in the fantasy season last year from weeks 1 through 17. I can't get on board with this cost when we mentioned like there's guys that have the same ceiling, I guess, and way more upside than Drake London going after him and AJ Brown and Ladd McConkey and Tyreek Hill and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Even T. Higgins as a wide receiver 2 on his team, I still think he has more upside than Drake London. But even you get further, like what's the difference between Mike Evans and Drake London? And he's going 30 picks later. Like take Mike Evans or DJ Moore, or DK Metcalf, or Cortland Sutton, like these guys that are planning to be wide receiver 1s for their team too. I just don't see all that big of a difference in these guys. Like from weeks 1 through 17, Garrett Wilson and Drake London were scoring the same amount of points per game. Ladd McConkey, JSN, Jamison Williams, Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison, Terry McLaurin, all ahead of Drake London by a decent margin. So I can't get on board with London's cost.
Yeah, I simply do not get it. There's some people that love London. It could be just for the offensive skill set he was surprisingly still. It kind of still boggles my mind that he was the first wide receiver drafted in his class that was loaded with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and all those guys. So it's still surprising to me. I mean, he had a pretty good career at USC. I think a lot of it is the spot size and speed. He's got some speed, but his red zone ability is pretty well known with his frame and all that. So I think there's some pieces you like, and Drake London is just that tantalizing receiver just because of his size and potential hands to really put up some numbers. But again, how much do you really want to buy that high in the Falcons offense there, where there's so many other offenses that you can invest in the pass game, so many other proven quarterbacks you can also look at that you go after instead of Michael Penix. I don't think Penix is normally going to fall flat. He's probably going to score higher than his deep QB2 cost, but that doesn't necessarily mean Drake London is going to just rack up all the points. I think I see it more spreading around, Darnell Mooney being involved, some of these other receivers being involved. And again, Drake London just too expensive. And again, the numbers are very deceptive. Keep this in mind over and over again. One game, and we keep looking at it. We talked about Bo Nix having the same thing. One game, look at the whole body of work, where he finished, look at the consistency. I don't think it's there with Drake London. So I'm okay not taking him, Tyreek Hill. There's just so many guys in that range that I'd rather have than maybe an overrated guy and maybe an older guy. And that's my point here. That was your point with London.
Stay up to date all year on fantasy football by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Fantasy Football on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Iowa State and Kansas State face off in a massive Week 0 matchup. Gods have blessed Week 0 with a ranked matchup. Iowa State versus Kansas State in Dublin, of all places. Locked On Big 12 host Drake Toll previews this early throwdown in Farmageddon.
I hope that you're enjoying it. I hope you're in Dublin. I hope you're enjoying college football coming to the Irish country? Yes, coming to Irish country. The Guinness be flowing. I don't like the fact that I can't go to this game. I went to Farmageddon to end last season. It was brutally cold, and now it's going to kick off the opener of this year. I hate that a top 25 team for the Big 12 is going to lose, and they may drop out of the top 25. But what I do love is the fact that college football is back, and for that, I'm excited. If you hit subscribe, I can keep my job. Stats O War. I'm going to tell you this right now, and I'll say the rest of the college football season. Stats O War on Twitter is where I go week in and week out for in-depth breakdowns on college football. It's where I get the majority of my analytical information, and Parker is the man. 42% win probability for Iowa State. That is where we're going to start today. Projected at 21 points in this game. And here is the big thing that I'm circling. If I'm a Kansas State fan, if I'm a Big 12 fan, or a general analyst, or somebody watching this game, I'm looking for one thing. It is the defensive success rate for Iowa State and how low it was last season, based off of what the Cyclones did last year. Now, it was a double-digit win team that went to the Big 12 championship, vied for a conference title, beat a good ACC school in a bowl game. 99th in the country against the rush. 91st overall in defensive success rate. 68th against the pass. Those things aren't necessarily great. That's where I am not exactly confident that Iowa State will show up against a deadly running attack that Kansas State is going to bring. If you ask my friend Parker, Stats O War, what he thinks about Kansas State in this matchup, 58% win probability, projected points at 25. So the 3-point spread is pretty reasonable. It's kind of where I sit on this one. I think I said earlier in the week, 28-24 is my projection. That is a very clean score. I can see this being a clean game. Someone asked me, who has the coaching advantage in this matchup? And I said, neither. Like, both of these schools tout two of the better head coaches in the Big 12. I think that Matt Campbell has obviously done a spectacular job at Iowa State, better than any coach in their history, in rebuilding a program that was poor, very poor, not from a financial standpoint, just as in bad at football. Kansas State, the question was forever, even after Bill Snyder, can they win without Bill Snyder? The answer was no, so Bill Snyder had to come back. Then Chris Kleiman comes in out of North Dakota State, and I remember the game in 2020 where Kansas State lost to Baylor in Waco. That was the final game of that COVID year. Baylor was 2-7, and all the Kansas State fans in the pouring rain said, fire Chris Kleiman. Now the guy has a Big 12 championship under his belt. He hasn't lost. I'll put it this way. He has not lost the fan base despite not winning a Big 12 championship since 2022. And those are like weird words coming out of my mouth. People keep asking him. They're like, hey, you know, are we antsy a little bit about Chris Kleiman? Do we feel like, oh, he's got to start winning again? He's got to start winning a conference championship. It's like, no, we have 16 teams. You can't just do it every year. This doesn't just happen every year, and your head coach can still be elite, winning 8, 9, 10 games year in and year out for Kansas State, which it seems like Chris Kleiman is doing. I give the nod here in the running back battle to Iowa State. I give the nod in the quarterback battle to Kansas State. I think the receiver matchup, tight ends matchup is honestly fairly even given the way that Iowa State reloaded out of the transfer portal. The difference here is going to be the trenches. That's where Pick 6 Previews says that Iowa State is in the bottom half of the Big 12, offensive line and defensive line. Kansas State, on the other hand, sits kind of in the middle upper end of the conference. Not they're elite in those categories in this league, but they're better than Iowa State by a bit. The offensive skill position battle could just like be a dead even draw. Offensive success last season for Kansas State, it's 44th in the country. Defensive success, they were 6th combined in the nation. They had a very good year and were on the precipice of a Big 12 championship at the end of the season. Lost to Iowa State in Ames. Now going into Ireland, I have a more purple lensed outlook on the way this game will go, purple lensed outlook on the way this season will go. And the reason that I said preseason I could see Iowa State at 7-5, and most people are upset with that, is because if you lose in Ireland, the flight back home is not fun. And you got to play Iowa, South Dakota, Arkansas State's on the road. You should win all 3 of those games. I think you will win all 3 of those games. But South Dakota's a top 5 FCS school. We learned when North Dakota State beat Kansas State that there are very good FCS teams that can push you, that can make the scouting report tough. You're not playing Albany. You're not playing some bottom dweller of the, I guess Albany's good now, some random bottom dweller of the, you're not playing Towson. You know, that's easier. Nicholls State, you just walk in, we win, we go home. South Dakota's not like that.
And finally, Malachi Nelson is finally getting his shot. The former 5-star quarterback and number 1 recruit from the class of 2023 has been named UTEP's starter. Nelson's road has been anything but straight and smooth. He started at USC, transferred to Boise State, and now lands in El Paso with 3 years of eligibility in front of him. The most interesting part of all this, however, comes in week 3 when Nelson and the Miners head to Austin to face Texas and Arch Manning, setting up a showdown between 2 of the most hyped quarterbacks in recent memories. The reverse road to glory doesn't look too good on the resume, but at least Nelson is finally getting his shot. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, what can we take away from the first weekend of college football? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.